So, dear President Milatović, distinguished guests, colleagues, students and friends of Humboldt-Universität, it is my great pleasure and also my honor to welcome you all this evening to Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin for this special Humboldt-Rede. We are particularly delighted to host you, Mr. President, as the first speaker from Montenegro here in Berlin, at an institution that has long stood for intellectual openness, critical inquiry, and the very idea that universities must engage with the pressing questions of their time, and of course we still do. Your presence today underscores the importance of dialogue between academia and political leadership, especially at a moment when Europe is once again and once more being called upon to reflect on its future. Your lecture, titled "The European Union Towards a New Era of Completion, Enlargement and Deepening," speaks directly to some of the most consequential challenges and opportunities facing our continent today. Europe is not, we all know that, it's not merely a geographic space, an area, it's also, and maybe most importantly, a project, one that is continuously evolving. It's a project shaped by shared values, by negotiation, by compromise, and also by the enduring aspiration for peace, stability, and prosperity. Yet it is also a project that must constantly renew itself in response both to internal tensions and also to external pressures. In this context, the themes of completion, enlargement, and deepening are not abstract concepts. They are deeply interconnected processes that will define the European Union in the years to come. For universities like ours, these developments are of profound importance. We are not only kind of observers of European integration, we are active participants of it. Our students come from across the continent and beyond. Our researchers collaborate, certainly across borders. Our teaching is shaped by the diversity of perspectives that Europe makes possible. At the same time, we are keenly aware that the European project is not equally experienced by all. The question of enlargement in particular reminds us that Europe remains unfinished, that its promise is still unfolding. Montenegro's path towards the European Union membership is emblematic of both the opportunities and the complexities of this process. It reflects a commitment to reform, to democratic values, and to the idea that the European Union remains a community open to those who share its principles. Your leadership, Mr. President, comes at a time when this commitment is being tested and redefined. We are therefore especially grateful to have you chosen to share your perspectives with us today. As a university, we believe that dialogue is essential, not only, certainly also, but not only between governments, but between societies, generations, and disciplines. Events such as this Humboldt-Rede create a space where such dialogue can flourish. They allow us to pause, to reflect, and to engage with ideas that shape our collective future. They also remind us of the responsibility that comes with knowledge, the responsibility to think critically, to listen carefully, and to contribute constructively to the public sphere. In this spirit, we look forward not only to your lecture, but also to the discussion that will follow. I'm certain that your insights will inspire reflection and debate among us gathered here. We now turn from the welcome on behalf of Humboldt-University to a second greeting. Our sincere thanks goes to the Stiftung Mercator for its generous support of the Humboldt speeches, and I am pleased to invite Ms. Nina Ohlmeyer as head of Mercator Center Berlin to offer her welcome. Thank you.
Excellency President Milatović, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. On behalf of Stiftung Mercator, it is a great honor to welcome you today to the renowned Humboldt speech on Europe. The Humboldt speeches have grown into a valued tradition. They bring together political leaders, students, scholars, and members of civil society to reflect on Europe's future during periods of profound transformation. We are proud to be part of this journey and are grateful to the Walter Hallstein Institute at Humboldt-University for our long-standing cooperation. Mr. President, your visit comes at a decisive moment for Europe. The European Union is on the verge of a new era, shaped by geopolitical uncertainty, shifting alliances, and growing expectations of Europe's role as a global player. In such times, Europe's strength comes from unity and from its ability to integrate neighboring countries and forge a shared future. This is why today's topic, the European Union towards a new era of completion, enlargement, and deepening, is both timely and essential. At Stiftung Mercator, we view enlargement as a strategic project for Europe's future. It strengthens stability, builds trust, and expands Europe's capacity to act in an increasingly complex world. In this context, Montenegro plays a particularly important role. As the most advanced candidate country in the Western Balkans, Montenegro has demonstrated commitment and perseverance, as well as a clear European orientation. Since accession negotiations were opened in 2012, the country has advanced institutional alignment, strengthened the rule of law, and promoted democratic reforms. We are convinced that Europe grows beyond formal negotiations too. It grows through dialogue, as we already heard, cooperation and shared experience. We therefore, as a foundation, facilitate spaces for exchange between EU member states and candidate countries, build bridges across societies, and strengthen mutual trust. The strategy of our department, Europe in the World, reflects this commitment. We support initiatives that encourage transnational cooperation and dialogue on shared challenges and demonstrate the tangible benefits of stronger European integration. European unity grows where people encounter one another, share perspectives, and develop joint solutions. And today is one example for this. We encourage Europe to think bigger, to imagine a continent that remains open and resilient and is capable of shaping its role in the world. President Milatović, Montenegro's European path reflects ambition and responsibility. Your country's experience will contribute to shaping Europe's future. And we are honored to welcome you today and very much look forward to hearing your speech. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Dear students, professors, and friends, it is indeed my sincere pleasure to stand here before you at Humboldt-University, a place whose academic legacy has largely influenced German and the overall European thought, politics, and reality. And that is why today's lecture and discussion bear special significance for me, as to come to Berlin is to enter the heart of Europe. There is no better place to speak about what Europe was, what Europe is now, and what Europe is yet to become. 70 years ago, as the continent pieced itself back together, Konrad Adenauer warned, unless we act, events that we Europeans will be unable to influence will overtake us. And these words proved to be prophetic. Throughout the decades of the Cold War that followed, Europe was but an arena divided by an iron line that passed right through this very city. Today, in the newest global reshuffling, we must be aware of the same threat, but a threat with a new twist. And now the question presents itself. In the emerging geopolitical chess, how does the European Union ensures it does not end up as a piece on the board, but as a player? The answer lies in a concept that has made its way from the margins of European political debate to becoming almost an imperative today. And this is strategic autonomy. In today's address, I wish to present how that imperative might be met through three key dimensions that can carry the European project forward. And these are completion, enlargement, and deepening. So to start from the first one, the European Union has been built treaty by treaty, from Rome to Maastricht to Lisbon. However, while the policy perimeter and powers have gradually been expanding, the crucial part remains incomplete. And this is an even stronger political union. A Europe that cannot make collective political decisions at the speed that geopolitical reality demands remains strategically exposed. Consider what this means in practice. Common foreign security policy in the European Union today requires unanimity, meaning that any single member state can veto a common position. And the same applies to defense. Subcontracting security after the terrors of the Second World War outside of Europe was a rational arrangement back then, as it provided time for Europe to rebuild and to recover. Today, dear friends, it might prove too costly. So the completion of Europe's political and security architecture is a precondition for the EU to stand tall in the face of ongoing global uncertainty. Strategic autonomy means capacity to act politically, and it means moving foreign and security policy to qualified majority voting, ending the unanimity veto that any single capital can deploy to paralyze the common European action. It means building a genuine European defense, not as a replacement for NATO, whose proud part Montenegro has been since 2017 as well, but as the foundation of a Europe that can defend itself if it must. Secondly, the most profound power of the European Union is the transformative one. And the accession of the former Central and Eastern European countries demonstrated this with historic clarity. Nations that emerged from the decades of the Soviet Union rule became functioning democracies anchored in European laws and values. And EU's global relevance deeply rests on its gravitational pull, the ability to enlarge, dear friends, other countries, thus transforming them from the inside. And as the president of the most advanced candidate country for the EU membership, I can attest the importance of the promise that membership has on Montenegro and on all the other candidate countries. However, to reach its full capacity, enlargement must be based on both political will and principles. And this can be showcased through 4 different scenarios, which are determined by 2 crucial factors in this process. The first one being the political will of the European Union to get in the new member states. And the other one being the political will of the candidate countries to pursue reforms. So the first scenario out of those 4 is the one that I like to call stagnation without recognition. And what is this about? This is a scenario in which a candidate country fails to use this accession process to advance democratically and institutionally, and the EU withholds recognition. And the outcome is a clear loss, both for the candidate country as well as for the EU, because the EU is left with incomplete democracies at its very borders, while the candidate country remains deprived of the benefits of the membership, with forces of de-democratization gaining ground. And predictably, this is the scenario most welcomed by opponents of the European project. And those opponents seize the opportunity to expand their influence at the borders of the European Union. The second scenario is the one that I call progress without accession. And that's the scenario in which a candidate country genuinely invests in institutional reform and democratic standards, yet accession does not follow. And history shows that this often leads to frustration, to regression, and the erosion of hard-earned democratic gains. Don't forget, democracy is not a one-way street. It's a constant daily effort. And in the long run, in this scenario, also both sides lose. So think of the case of Northern Macedonia, the country that even changed its name with no major EU accession progress that followed. The third scenario is the one where the accession happens, but without reforms in a candidate country. So a candidate country demonstrates insufficient democratic progress, yet is admitted primarily for geopolitical reasons. Though some politicians may advocate for this approach, regardless of reform performance, it is ultimately unsustainable and undermining for the fundamentals of the European Union project. And while it may appear to satisfy in the short run both the EU's enlargement momentum and the candidate countries' ambitions, particularly regarding the candidate countries' increased development funding, the long-term cost may be severe. Core values such as the rule of law and effective governance are compromised. And moreover, this scenario creates fertile ground for the adversarial actors to project influence from within the EU. And I come to the fourth scenario, the one of the win-win. where both sides deliver. The candidate country uses the accession process as an external anchor to achieve genuine democratic transformation, to build resilient institutions, to safeguard media freedom, and pursue sustainable economic development. And then is welcomed into the EU as a fully prepared member state. And this is the optimal outcome, the one of the perfect world, one that ensures shared growth, resilience, prosperity, and stability. And it is the one that I envision for Montenegro. And this leads me to my final point, the third dimension, which rests on the EU's need for a deeper integration. So let me give you an example. 70 years ago, at the very formative time for the European community, the first European Commissioner, Walter Hallstein, had a vision, a common European market as the bedrock of future integration. He was able to look beyond the nation state. And thanks to that vision, today, 18 commissions later, the European single market generates nearly a fifth of the global GDP. And this institute carries his name. The market is what makes the Union the world's economic giant. But it is much more than that. It is indeed the European agora, a gathering place of all our societies, stretching from Lisbon all the way to the Baltics. And in a world where only the fittest survive, unchaining European economic potential through deeper integration is so important for the survival of the Union. And in order to achieve this, once again, Europe needs vision. A vision that allows us to finish what people such as Hallstein started. The next generation of economic power will rest on the ability of Europe to innovate and to compete with all other global actors. And in order to do that, Europe needs to remove internal barriers and to create the EU's capital market able to fund innovation and the European growth. And that must be the vision of the current generation of the European leaders. So to conclude, I began this lecture with a warning that we must not allow ourselves to be witnesses of history, but its actors. The Cold War had written Europe's history as that of division. Here in Berlin, that division was the most visible, presented in stone and in wire. And the European Union is the rejection of all of that. A resolution that European countries made in order to overcome those divisions. And it is what made the EU member states some of the most prosperous societies in the world. However, the emerging era brings us back to Adenauer's words as we enter a period of increased competition, uncertainty, and turbulence. And only by engaging in the discussed directions can Europe retain its strategic relevance. A politically complete union can act. An enlarged Europe can lead. And a deeper Europe can compete. And you are the powerhouse of future European politics, and you are the generation which will decide whether Europe rises to this challenge. Thank you very much.
It's a privilege for us to have you here, Mr. President, also to be prepared to answer the questions of our students. I think the microphone's not working. Oh, thank you. But you heard what I said, yeah? But for those on the live stream, it's a great privilege for us not only to have your great speech, but you being prepared to answer the questions of our students. And I can tell you, I do this every day, and sometimes it's not so easy to answer these questions. So I invite the Humboldt students to ask their question. I have one question here on the left, and a second one here.
I also want to second the assessment and thank the President for his attendance and for his eloquent presentation. And my question regards the proposal you made to abolish the anonymity in foreign policy decision-making in the European Union, because I have large doubts about the likelihood of that happening. Since the Treaty of Lisbon, there's been no change in the treaties of the European Union to advance majority decision-making, and when there was a citizen-initiated push in the Conference for Europe to abolish anonymity, there were 13 European member states who resisted that approach. And if you look at the treaty as it is now, which you would have to renegotiate otherwise, there's only one path to achieve this majority voting in foreign policy, which is Article 31, paragraph 3 of the Treaty of the European Union, which in turn requires anonymity to even go to the state of qualified majority decision-making. So wouldn't it be more wise to concentrate on a more likely option of achieving more bilateral intergovernmental cooperation inside of a framework of the European Union by, for example, relying on Article 20 of the Treaty of the European Union? Because Article 20 of the European Union already allows 9 member states to take action and form associations and corporations among themselves and go forward without having to get the acceptance of all the other member states. And I think if one wants to combine the deepening of European integration with the possibility of expanding the European Union without making it more dysfunctional, this approach of a European Union of concentric circles, as it was called, or a Europe of two tracks, as called by the now deceased Wolfgang Schäuble, would be more likely to succeed than the approach of a new change in the treaties.
I think it's a legit question, which is, as I see it, very much based on the legal readings of the treaties. But I think that the approach is perhaps not visionary enough. It is legit. It's practical. It's perhaps resolving the political problem that currently we have in Europe. You have in Europe. We are still not a member state, but I was elaborating on the vision. If Europe wants to stay politically competitive, this needs to change. It's as easy as that. And whether you're going to change it in this way or in that way, I believe it's just part of a technicality. In my opinion, think about Berlin a few years after the World War II. Think about all the atrocities that have been done in Europe. And back then, Europe was able to create something which was the starting point of what now European Union is. Wasn't that a difficult task? In my opinion, million times more difficult than the one that Europe is facing now. And I would approach that problem exactly in the way that I have just explained. Then, if you also think about the treaties, there are some of the crucial things, including security architecture or the euro as a currency, which is sort of not shared by all the members of the EU. Neither all the members of the EU are part of NATO, EI members of the same security architecture, nor are all the members of the EU part of the Eurozone. So you already have some kind of a non-unanimity on two crucial things, like currency, or the monetary policy, and defense. And I don't really see the reason why the European leaders, are not able to agree on what is a key competitive edge for Europe in the future.
Thank you very much for your clear answer. The second question was very near to the first one.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, hvala vam puno što ste vi došli kod naš univerzitet sad. My question is also about a transformation. You had a crucial experience working at the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. And how do you see the transformation of Montenegro from post-Yugoslavia? And does it even need a transformation? In Germany, we have the same discourse about the former GDR, which you also mentioned with the water thing. And our university's professor of sociology, Stefan Mau, also pointed out several scenarios, referring back to your question, how can one successfully restore a former Eastern country, which are different forms of participation to raise people's trust in the democratic system, which is pretty much true. Also for Montenegro, from my experience, while talking to many people in Montenegro, traveling across the country in the last 3 years, then it's respecting the special identity of the people and making the East, well, Montenegro, GDR, the engine, the initiator of its own production and economy instead of blind adaptation to the West. To which extent all this can be applied to Crna Gora? Hvala puno.
You have excellent questions. I wasn't expecting anything less from the students of this institution. I was born in 1986 in the capital city of back then, the Republic of Montenegro, so the state within the former Yugoslavia of Montenegro. And the name of the country was the Federal Socialist Republic of Yugoslavia. Then I grew up and I started my school age in the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which was the union only of Serbia and Montenegro. And then I ended up, when I was at my student age, in a country whose name was Serbia and Montenegro. And then I am now the president of Montenegro. So over the last 40 years of my life, I lived in 4 different countries. And that's about change. I was born in a country which was one of the leading nations of the so-called non-alignment movement. This place where we are now, at the time when I was born, was part of the Warsaw Pact. Now, both myself and you are part of NATO. Think of that. Back in 2017, Montenegro entered NATO. And a very smart analyst from the office of the president said to me, President, when Montenegro entered NATO in 2017, it was the first time after the Roman Empire that the whole northern Mediterranean was part of one geopolitical bloc. So it took 1,700 years for the European part of the Mediterranean to once again join the same security and geopolitical family. All the way from the 4th century and the division of the Roman Empire, the division of the East and West, the divisive lines between the Ottomans and the Habsburgs, the divisive lines between the NATO and the Warsaw Pact or the non-alignment movement. This is now the first time that we all live in one geopolitical and security alliance. What I'm trying to say is, I like the theory that you have presented, and I think it's the right one. I do want to complement it, providing you with 3 additional arguments. If you want to change a place from A to B, or a country from a state A to a state B, which we like to call development, you need 3 ingredients. The first one is the will. If you want to move, you need to want to move. So the decision makers in that country are required to have a political will to change, number 1. Number 2, you need to have the political capacity to do that. What does that mean in a democracy? You need to work to build consensuses, sometimes with the unions, sometimes with the associations of the employers, sometimes with the opposition. And number 3, you need to know how to do it. And not many countries have all 3 things at the same time. So the EU accession is a God-given process for those who want to have it, to have all three things at the same time, for a country to basically prosper and to become democratically stable and prosperous. And this is what has been a transformative experience, not only of the East. Think of the South. Think of Greece. A few years after the military junta. Think of Spain after Franco's. Spain was a dictatorship for almost 40 years. Think of Portugal. Does any of you now think of those countries from the lenses of dictatorships? No, because the European leaders in the 70s invested not only in the stability and prosperity of South Europe by taking those countries in, but also about stability and prosperity of Europe as a whole. And the same happened following the fall of the Berlin Wall towards the East. And now I believe it's the time for the same thing to happen vis-a-vis the Balkans. And this is where the role of Montenegro comes to play. We are the smallest by far. We are the size of Stuttgart. It's a great city. And the story of Montenegro is a story of storytelling and success. And this is how we can also influence the others. And this is how I see the things.
Thank you very much. So I see some hands. There's some very far in the back.
Mr. President, thank you for coming to Berlin, and thank you for your speech. My name is Arber Balidemai, and I'm a PhD student in Bonn and focusing on the relations between Montenegro and Germany. I come from...
That's your thesis?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And I come from a municipality in Montenegro where we have a lot of ethnic groups. And it's Gusinia, if you've ever been. I saw you in Plav a few years ago.
I've been to Gusinia as well.
Oh, really? Okay. So, discussing politics and discussing the situation of Montenegro, I often come across the term Switzerland of the Balkans. What do you think about that, let's say, thesis that Montenegro could become the Switzerland of the Balkans regarding that it's a multi-ethnic country? Thank you.
So there are two similarities between Montenegro and Switzerland. The first, Montenegro means Black Mountains. So when the Venetians in the 15th century, you know that the Venetians controlled most of the Eastern Mediterranean with their great ships. And they controlled, most of coastal Montenegro as well. And then when you are in the Adriatic Sea, looking towards the continent, you see a lot of very dark green pine trees. And this is where, they obviously, sort of look like black, although they are dark green. And then, it's very hilly. So this is where the name comes from. Switzerland is also a very hilly country, right? So that's the first similarity. The second one is we are both a very heterogeneous societies in terms of ethnicity, as well as religion. So according to the last census in Montenegro, we have about 45% of those who say are ethnically Montenegrins. We have about 35% of those who say they are Serbs. Then we have Bosniaks, we have Muslims, we have Albanians, we have Croats, we have Roma people. So it's very heterogeneous ethnically. The same as Switzerland is, right? You have German-speaking people, you have French-speaking people, you have Italian-speaking people, etc. And there are two big differences. The first is economic wealth. We are not there yet, but there is a huge potential. And the second one is that not many Montenegrins are selected to guard the Pope. So those are the two differences. But jokes aside, I think that this is how I see Montenegro, and this is where I came back to Montenegro, and I was never a politician. I was invited to the government as an expert. So I joined the government as an economy minister in a very difficult time for Montenegro. It was December 2020. There was a change of the government following the parliamentary elections. And then there was a university professor, although a mechanical engineer, who needed somebody to take care of the economy. It was a big recession, a lot of structural problems, and he basically wanted somebody to, overnight make Switzerland out of Montenegro. So this is how I ended up in politics. And this is where the EU accession process comes. This is the only roadmap towards development where you simultaneously get the funding as well as build institutions. And that's crucial because in the long run, the financial gains in democracies come as a result of institutional setup. And funnily enough, I think that the EU accession is leading Montenegro towards the Switzerland in terms of economic development.
Thank you so much. The interesting thing being that Switzerland is not in the EU, but that's another point. Okay, there's a question over here, please.
Thank you very much, Humboldt, and thank you, Mr. President, for being here. My name is Dr. Anuj Nandi, and I have a question for you. What sectors does Montenegro see as the key drivers of its future economy? And how can international students or young professionals engage with these opportunities? Also, to add a bit, and for students, what leadership qualities do you believe are most essential in today's political environment? Thank you very much.
I'm a big believer in hard work. By answering your question, I do want to, tell you one example. So and this is really what makes the difference between Switzerland and Montenegro, as well as between, the EU and perhaps some of the Western Balkan countries. When I was working for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, we did almost an annual survey in most of the countries where the bank operated, asking some very simple questions to ordinary people. And one of the questions was, what is needed to succeed in life? Very simple question. And some of the answers, that were provided were hard work, talent, or political connections. And Germany was a benchmark country. You know how many people usually answered political connections are important to succeed in life in Germany? 3 to 5%. You know what was the average in the Balkans? 30 to 35%. So every third person answered that in order to succeed in life, you need to have political connections. And that's what has been undermining development of the Western Balkans over the last 30 years. And so going back to what is needed, I think that what is needed in politics is exactly what you need to succeed in every other aspect, and that's hard work and talent. And very often talent can be compensated by even harder work. Going back to what you said, to your question about the structure of our economy, we are a beautiful Mediterranean gem. So obviously tourism is a big source of our economic activity. About 20 to 25% of the economic activity is related to tourism. And I do want to invite you to see it yourself. The second big part of our economy is energy. So we are energy abundant, especially with hydro potential and with renewables. And this is, where now, part of the growth is also coming. On top of the production capacities, what is also unique about Montenegro is that all the trade between the Balkans, which is generally electricity producing region, and Italy, which is energy consuming country, is through Montenegro. Because Montenegro is the only country from the Balkans that has undersea cable connection with Italy. So we sort of also serve as a transmission road from the Balkans to Italy and vice versa. And the third thing is logistics. So, and this is where the potential is. Think of Europe, imagine the map. When the ships go out from the Suez Canal, where most of the trade between China, generally Asia and Europe, goes through, the first ports that those ships, come to are the Greek ports and the ports of the former Yugoslavia, including the one in Montenegro. And this is why there is so much investment now in speedy railroads connecting those ships, those ports from Southeast Europe towards Central Europe and the German value chain industries of Central Europe. And this is also where a huge potential is. And obviously digital economy, AI and programming. And this is where the country has benefited a lot, also with the introduction of the so-called digital nomads visas, especially after the Russian war in Ukraine, where many of the smart people from that part of Europe actually has chosen to move, including to move to Montenegro.
Thank you for giving us this also basic insight, and I apologize for not having known it before most of it. There's a lady in the front row.
Dobro večer, gospodine predsjedniče. Hvala što ste večeras došli ovdje. My parents are native to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they grew up in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia before eventually moving here to Germany for a better life after the war. My question to you tonight is, how would you assess the current prospects for further EU enlargement in the Western Balkans, and what factors could most influence whether post-Yugoslav countries successfully join the European Union in the coming years? Thank you very much.
By the way, you know that Bosnia qualified for the football championship. They disqualified Italy, and I think that the marketing industry was also very unhappy about it. So I think that genuinely, and this is what I also said today in Bundestag, the accession of Montenegro into the EU would be a story much bigger than Montenegro, because it would be this positive message to all other countries in the neighborhood, in the Western Balkans, but also in the east of Europe, that the enlargement is alive. Many people in the Balkans don't believe anymore that the accession is possible at all. 10 days ago, I was in North Macedonia. North Macedonia got a candidacy status before Montenegro became independent. They got it in 2005. Most of Macedonians don't believe in European future anymore. The last country that entered the EU was Croatia, 13 years ago, while in the meantime, UK left. So when Montenegro enters, and I'm not saying if, but when Montenegro enters, I believe that the big message will be the enlargement is alive. Huge message. The second big message will be new political culture represented by this new generation of politicians in the Balkans, including myself, pays off. And reforms pay off. And this is going to be a huge positive spillover effect for all the other countries in the Western Balkans, including for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you very much for your answer, Mr. President. There's another lady on this side of the room.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be here. In the second section of your speech, you said that democracy is a constant effort, and daily effort to work on it. And certainly that's also the great thing about democracy. But sometimes it's just like we do not imagine this kind of effort. And Montenegro is already a NATO member and maintains a clear pro-European stance, despite various competing influences in the region. But what I question myself is, to what extent has the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine influenced the enlargement momentum, and also for the Western Balkans? And how is Montenegro protecting itself against hybrid threats in this context?
It influenced massively. It was a game changer, because Europe, for many years, European leaders have forgotten that the enlargement, as I said in my lecture, was also about security of the European continent. It were the Russians who woke up Europe. It was a wake-up call in Brussels, but also here in Berlin, in Paris, name it. And this was the year when the enlargement became once again geopolitical thing. And, I was very clearly saying that I'm absolutely in favor of the fourth scenario, the one where the candidate country pursues reforms. You need to have, a minimum standards. You need to have some kind of a technical process as well. But it was the Russian war in Ukraine that was a wake-up call for Europe, that the enlargement process is also about the security of the European continent. And this is why I believe Montenegro's accession is this, successful story that should really, play a spillover effect. Perhaps now, many are saying that the people of Iceland, during the referendum that they're having this summer, could decide to restart negotiations with the EU. So you can have also a baseline scenario where, in a few years' time, you would have one country from the north, being Iceland, and one country from the south, being Montenegro, joining the EU at the same time. I think that's a plausible scenario. When it comes to cyber threats, it was really a heavy cyber attack that Montenegro experienced back in 2022, which reminded us how weak we were in that regard. So, you know, when it comes to Montenegro and its geography, the attack is not necessarily physical. So we are not really expecting anybody to come with tanks. But what we have been experiencing constantly are the cyber attacks. And only after this very severe one, which basically paralyzed our public administration, we took this topic seriously. And only with the support, especially from the European Commission, from our American friends, from NATO, I think that we have now, you know, rebuilt our system to be a bit more resilient than what was the case back in 2022.
There's one question here just in front of me, and I think, yeah, you were showing up a long time. You were very patient. And the microphone is coming.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question regarding these scenarios, because you mentioned that there are 4 of them, but I suppose one could imagine one more negative. When a country starts so harshly it wants to join an alliance, and sometimes the ways are questionable. For example, the last immigration law, which was criticized mostly by German community in Montenegro, and many, I would say thousands of people were affected of them. And I'm not talking about the certain paragraphs, but the way how it was accepted, because it was the end of December, and all the holidays, Christmas, New Year, etc. And the 2 last readings in Skupština, they passed so quickly that almost no one mentioned it, and even some officials who are working at immigration offices, they were not able to tell what's going on. And I totally understand that Montenegro needs to recreate their immigration policy, but my question was, why was it made so quickly? So many people were sitting and thinking, should we be living in some months, or what should we do? Thank you very much.
So you're basically sort of saying that we have strengthened our immigration laws, and you're right. And this came in December of the last year, partly also as a requirement when it comes to the protection of the borders from the EU and the EU Commission. And we have done that. And I do want to connect what happened in Montenegro to the policy choice in Germany and generally in Europe 10 years ago. And I have said this to some of the current prime ministers and presidents, and I think that I have made them thinking about it. About 10 years ago, the policy choice in Germany and generally in Europe was open door for immigration and closed door for enlargement. Right? And now it's exactly the opposite. It's more or less most of the countries in Europe are strengthening immigration policies, making Europe less open, but at the same time, they're opening door for enlargement. And this is, I believe, within the current political setup, a more rational choice. I'm just going to leave it with you there.
Thank you very much also for answering to, let's say, sensitive questions. And you can imagine that migration law is, or migration politics is a subject very deeply discussed among students. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. Now there is, in some minutes, there will be a reception, and the President will be with us sometime, I was told. It's a privilege for you to have, for us to have you with us. And I would like to quote in the end a newspaper article I read with a smile last Saturday in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which titled, "Wer hat Angst vor Montenegro?" I don't think I have to translate that. Who is afraid of Montenegro? And certainly we are not. And to underline my gratitude, there's a little gift I wish to give you from the Walter Hallstein Institute. It contains other speeches given by your predecessors, starting with Emmanuel Macron. So
wow.
You will like it. And thank you so much for being with us.
Yes,
thank you for your time.
I brought a bigger book.
Oh.
This is what is, oh, okay, so this is the one which is basically explaining the relationship between Germany and Montenegro. And perhaps, you know, this, do you have it? Very good. So,
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you very
That's
much.
a real great gift. Before the reception, I thank Mr. President again, but also everybody supporting us, Stiftung Mercator, the European Commission, our Vice President, the university, and the lovely, our great team, the Humboldt Speeches team, who does everything from flowers to microphones to everything. Thank you. Thanks to you.